What if Earth wasn't as young as we think?
Not in the way we understand time.
What if, every 12,000 years, the world quietly resets, civilizations erased, memories buried, and only whispers left behind in stone and myth? Imagine waking up in the ashes of a forgotten world, one rebuilt from ruins older than history itself. From the sudden melt of the last ice age to the legends of Atlantis, from cataclysmic floods to mysterious ancient maps, each clue seems to hum the same haunting tune, that humanity has walked this path before. Perhaps what we call prehistory is merely the last chapter of an older story, one lost to the waves of time. Tonight, as the world quiets and your thoughts drift into the soft rhythm of night, we'll journey together through the echoes of Earth's hidden cycles.
And wonder, could it all happen again?
The night is still. The stars above shimmer in a quiet rhythm, their light reaching us from distances so vast that even eternity seems to echo. As you listen, imagine Earth not as a static sphere, but as something alive, a being that breathes, shifts, and renews itself in great cycles of creation and loss. For what if the world we know has not simply evolved linearly, but rather
has been reborn again and again every 12,000 years?
In this quiet moment, let's look beneath the surface, far below the soil and stone, past the traces of cities and civilizations. Down there, hidden in the deep layers of time, the Earth keeps a record of its memory. Layers of sediment, ancient ice, and volcanic ash form the pages of a story that stretches back millions of years. When scientists drill into the ice of Greenland or Antarctica, they are not merely gathering data, they are unearthing history itself, frozen mid-breath. And what they've found is unsettling. Patterns, rhythms, echoes. Every 12 millennia or so, something changes dramatically, violently, and suddenly. The climate swings, oceans rise, ice sheets collapse.
Life reorganizes.
The geological record doesn't whisper.
It sings this recurring song, a cycle of destruction and renewal.
Take the Younger Dryas, a mysterious period about 12,800 years ago. Before it, the world was emerging from the Ice Age, the air warming, glaciers retreating, rivers awakening. But then, in an instant of geological time, the warmth vanished. Temperatures plummeted. The Earth froze again, as if some great hand had pressed the reset button. And when the ice finally receded centuries later, something had changed. The planet was reborn, and human civilization as we know it began to stir. But what caused such a sudden shift? Some say it was the slow dance of Earth's orbit, a natural fluctuation called the Milankovitch cycle, which tilts and turns our planet in cosmic rhythm. Others believe it was a cataclysm, an impact from above. Fragments of a disintegrating comet, perhaps, striking the ice sheets of North America with unimaginable force. The evidence: layers of nanodiamonds, glassy spherules, and carbon-rich dust. Hints at fire raining from the sky. Whatever the cause, the pattern remains. Roughly every 12,000 years, the Earth seems to tremble in transition. And in those transitions, species vanish. Seas redraw coastlines, cultures disappear. Yet humanity persists. When we look at ancient myths, the stories of floods and fiery ends, of gods who cleanse and recreate, we begin to hear that same echo through our collective memory. The Sumerians told of a flood that wiped away kings and cities. The Egyptians spoke of cycles called Zep Tepi, the first times, when civilization had to be born anew. The Hopi, the Mayans, the Hindus, all described worlds destroyed and remade over and over in cosmic rhythm. Could these stories be more than metaphor? Could they be the inherited memory of cycles our ancestors survived? Geologists call this punctuated equilibrium, long periods of calm, broken by sudden and radical change. But the ancients may have known it differently.
To them it wasn't equilibrium.
It was rebirth. As you breathe, imagine the quiet earth before the storm. Calm oceans, green continents, peaceful skies. Then imagine it turning, a shift in the poles, tremors beneath the crust.
Winds rising with electric fury.
Within days or months, the familiar becomes foreign.
Mountains move. Rivers reverse. The very face of the planet alters.
And after the chaos, silence. The earth exhales and begins again. Perhaps that is why the ruins we find, impossibly old, misdated, misfit to their surroundings, don't align neatly within our history. Perhaps they are not remnants of our civilization, but of the one that came before. The world, after all, has been here much longer than we have, and time, it seems, is more circular than we ever imagined. Still, there is something haunting in this possibility. If the planet indeed follows a recurring pattern, then we must ask, where are we in that cycle now? Have we already begun to feel the faint tremors of another reset? The melting of polar ice, the shifting magnetic field, the rising seas. They seem like whispers of an ancient rhythm stirring once more. And so we look to the past not only to understand it, but to prepare for its return. For in the pattern of forgotten worlds, the end is never truly an ending, only a pause before the next beginning. The next chapter will lead us deeper under the frozen veil of ice, where secrets from lost worlds still sleep, waiting to be found. The deeper we dig into the past, the more it feels as though Earth's surface is not merely ancient, but haunted by its own memory. Each layer beneath our feet holds the trace of something that once was. Forests turned to coal, cities drowned beneath silt, bones pressed into stone. And like the slow ticking of a celestial clock, these layers seem to mark intervals, epochs of growth, destruction, and rebirth, aligning eerily close to that mysterious 12,000-year rhythm. In Greenland's ice cores, researchers have uncovered thin bands of ash and soot dating to roughly those same intervals, signs of wildfires, atmospheric collapse, and abrupt global cooling. Magnetic readings from the ocean floor tell a similar tale. Earth's magnetic poles, the invisible guardians of our atmosphere, have shifted dramatically before, sometimes even reversing altogether. Each reversal disrupts the field that shields us from cosmic radiation, leading to climatic chaos.
These are not random accidents.
They are patterns written into the planet's heartbeat. It is as though the Earth itself breathes in cycles, expanding, contracting, cleansing, renewing. When we trace this rhythm further back, we find a haunting synchronicity. Around 24,000 years ago, 2 cycles ago, the planet was deep in glacial cold. Ice stretched over continents. Yet, in hidden corners of the world, traces of human presence persisted. Charred tools beneath permafrost, fossilized footprints along ancient shorelines. Then, 12,000 years later, the ice retreated, and from the chaos emerged the first monumental architecture, Göbekli Tepe, the stone circles of Turkey. It's as if the survivors of a cataclysm carried memory into the next dawn. Scientists who study these transitions speak of abrupt climate events, times when the temperature rose or fell, not over centuries, but within years, sometimes even months.
Oceans swallowed coastlines, rainforests turned to deserts, and glaciers collapsed in roaring floods.
To those alive then, it must have seemed as though the world itself had ended, and perhaps in a way it had. Ancient texts mirror this upheaval with startling clarity. The Popol Vuh, sacred to the Maya, tells of the gods remaking humanity after previous creations were destroyed by floods and darkness. Hindu scriptures describe yugas, vast ages of time, each ending in catastrophe before life begins anew. Even Plato, quoting Egyptian priests, wrote of a civilization that perished in a single day and night of misfortune. The pattern, it seems, is universal. Could it be that these stories were never meant as allegories, but as memories of cycles survived?
Modern science may be catching up to that ancient knowing.
Studies of solar activity reveal periodic outbursts, massive solar flares that coincide roughly with those same 12 millennia transitions. A burst of cosmic radiation, a weakened magnetic shield, and the world below could change overnight. Entire ecosystems could collapse. Coastlines could drown beneath rising tides.
And yet always life returns.
Perhaps that is the most extraordinary part of this cycle. Not the destruction, but the renewal that follows. The Earth never truly ends. It merely reshapes itself, redistributes its energy, reimagines its story.
Life too adapts.
It clings to mountainsides, to ocean vents, to the smallest cracks in stone. And from those fragile footholds, it begins again. In this light, our civilization may not be the first, only the latest in a long lineage of rebirths. The pyramids, the ancient stone circles, the submerged cities off the coasts of India and Japan, they may be the faint fingerprints of worlds that existed before the last great turning. Worlds erased, yet not entirely forgotten. As we study the signs, the melting poles, the shifting magnetic fields, the quiet but measurable change in solar rhythm, we might sense that familiar tremor once more. The Earth moves, subtly but steadily, preparing for another transformation. But perhaps that realization need not bring fear, for within these cycles lies a strange comfort. The knowledge that endings are never permanent, that even in destruction there is creation, and that each reset may not erase us completely, but rather invite us to remember, to carry forward the lessons of all those who came before. In that way, we are not merely inhabitants of Earth, we are participants in its eternal renewal. As night deepens, imagine the great wheel of time turning silently above you. The stars remain fixed, yet beneath them the planet stirs. Ancient, breathing, alive. We too are part of that breath. The pattern continues. The story never ends. And so we turn the page, descending now beneath the ice, where echoes of the last lost world still sleep, frozen in silence, waiting for light once more. The world above sleeps in silence, but beneath the white veil of ice the Earth remembers. For thousands of years, the frozen continents of Greenland and Antarctica have hidden their secrets beneath kilometers of glacial glass, ancient worlds sealed away from time itself. And tonight, as we drift once more into that twilight space between wonder and dreaming, we descend beneath that frozen surface, to listen for the echoes still trapped there. The idea that something could lie buried beneath Antarctica, something not merely natural but crafted, was once the domain of myth. But as satellite technology sharpened its gaze, the ice began to whisper. In the last few decades, radar imaging has revealed strange shapes, vast linear ridges, geometric mounds, and circular depressions, arranged in patterns too deliberate to dismiss as mere coincidence. These are not the marks of glaciers drifting idly across rock. They resemble
Foundations.
The scientific term for these discoveries is subglacial anomalies, cold, clinical words for mysteries that have no easy explanation. Beneath 2 miles of ice, the radar pulses return echoes of what appear to be landscapes, valleys, rivers, even what might once have been coastlines. Some geologists suggest that these are remnants of an ancient world swallowed during the last great freeze around 12,000 years ago, the same period when the Earth, it seems, last reset. But others whisper of something older still. The frozen bedrock beneath Antarctica was not always a desert of ice. Around 50 million years ago it was lush, a forested land filled with rivers and life. Fossilized leaves and pollen tell that tale with quiet conviction. Yet newer evidence suggests there might have been another, more recent interlude of warmth, a time deep in the shadows of prehistory, when the ice thinned and perhaps, just perhaps, something human walked upon that soil. When we compare these radar anomalies to satellite data from Greenland, a curious symmetry appears. Under Greenland's ice, too, lies something unexpected. an ancient crater 31 kilometers wide, hidden until recently. Scientists believe it was caused by a meteor impact roughly 12,000 years ago, the very era that marked the end of the Younger Dryas and the flooding of the world's coasts. If that impact triggered the melt that buried early settlements beneath waves and ice, then Greenland and Antarctica are not merely frozen wastelands, they are tombs, time capsules from an era erased.
Legends echo this possibility.
Plato spoke of Atlantis, beyond the Pillars of Heracles, a land swallowed in a single day and night. Many have dismissed it as allegory. Yet as our instruments peer beneath the ice, it is difficult not to imagine that perhaps such a memory, half myth, half truth, was born from something real. Could Atlantis have been one of many cities consumed by the turning of the planet's great clock? Could its ruins, or those of its kin, now lie in frozen silence beneath Antarctic snow?
Ancient maps seem to suggest so.
The Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral, portrays Antarctica's coastline without its ice, an impossible feat, for no one in that era had ever seen it. When scholars analysed the map, they found it astonishingly accurate to modern sonar readings. Its creator claimed he copied older charts, maps of the ancient seafarers.
Who were they?
The evidence is like the faint hum of a melody half remembered. Science sees patterns but cannot yet explain them. Myth remembers stories but cannot yet prove them. And so the two begin to circle one another, like reflections in the ice, converging on something deeper. A shared memory of a time when Earth looked very different from what we know.
As we imagine those buried worlds, we begin to sense that the ice is not just concealing, it is preserving.
Within it, ancient air remains trapped in bubbles no larger than grains of sand. Fossilized microbes sleep in the dark, unchanged for eons. The ice does not merely entomb the past, it protects it, waiting for the moment when curiosity, technology, and courage align enough to release what it holds. If we could drill deeper, if we could melt through to those ancient plains and walk upon that frozen soil, what might we find? The bones of forgotten animals, the ruins of an age before ours, or evidence that history, as we know it, began not with us, but with something that came before, then vanished when the earth took its next breath. Perhaps beneath the ice lies the missing link between myth and science, the silent proof that civilizations rise and fall in rhythm with the heartbeat of the planet. And somewhere under all that frozen weight, the past still waits, patient, enduring, untouched by time. In the next part, we will follow the explorers and scientists who dared to reach beneath the Antarctic veil, the ones who claim to have glimpsed what may lie beneath, and the strange anomalies that even their instruments struggle to define. The journey beneath the ice begins not with myth, but with sound.
A deep, pulsing rhythm, the echo of radar waves descending into the frozen dark.
Each pulse bounces back a fragment of the past, painting ghostly images of what lies below. For the scientists who first mapped Antarctica's hidden world, it must have felt like staring into a mirror that reflected not the present, but another age entirely. In 2018, researchers from NASA's Operation Icebridge detected what seemed to be the outline of a vast structure buried deep within the ice, near the Princess Elizabeth Land region, an immense dome-like anomaly spanning miles. The data showed unnatural symmetry, sharp edges, right angles, and repeating patterns beneath 2,000 feet of ice. To most, it was dismissed as natural subglacial geology, the result of compression, flow, and pressure. But to others, it felt like a whisper of something ancient, perhaps architectural, perhaps forgotten. A similar mystery lingers beneath Greenland's thick white shell, the Hiawatha Crater, a colossal, circular depression hidden beneath a mile of ice, seems to date precisely to the twilight of the last ice age. Scientists believe it was carved by a massive meteorite impact that
struck with the force of thousands of atomic bombs.
The blast would have melted glaciers instantly, ignited global wildfires, and released enough debris to cloak the skies in darkness. The sudden freeze that followed, the Younger Dryas, might have been triggered by this very event. If so, that impact may have marked the moment Earth's last great civilization, if such a thing existed, met its end. The flood myths, the sudden extinctions, the collapse of climates, all pieces of a puzzle that begins perhaps beneath the ice. But beyond science there are stories, quiet and persistent. In 1949, a secretive US expedition called Operation High Jump set sail for Antarctica, led by Admiral Richard E. Byrd. Officially, it was a research mission. Unofficially, rumors swirled of something far stranger. Byrd later spoke of vast, unexplored lands beyond the pole, regions not covered by ice, teeming with life. His words ignited decades of speculation. Had he glimpsed something the rest of the world was not meant to see? Modern researchers, of course, treat such tales with skepticism. Yet even in the sober language of geology, new discoveries echo that same strangeness. Beneath the Antarctic ice lies Lake Vostok, sealed off for at least 15 million years. When scientists finally pierced its frozen barrier, they found a vast freshwater body stretching over 160 miles, and within it, traces of microbial life unlike any known species on the surface. Life had endured, isolated in darkness, adapting to pressures and temperatures no human could survive. If life can thrive in such silence, could it not also leave behind artifacts of its existence? Some researchers propose that if an ancient human or pre-human culture once lived on Antarctica before it froze, its remains could still lie preserved in near-perfect condition beneath the ice. The glacial layers, moving slowly like time itself, would have entombed everything, buildings, tools, bones, untouched by decay. And if the planet indeed resets itself every 12 millennia, then perhaps Antarctica was once not a wasteland at all, but the heart of a flourishing world. When we overlay the continent's present position onto ancient geological maps, another revelation emerges. Once long ago, Antarctica was not at the South Pole. The theory of crustal displacement, proposed by geophysicist Charles Hapgood and supported, intriguingly, by Albert Einstein, suggests that the entire outer crust of the Earth can shift as a single shell. In such a scenario, an advanced civilization could have existed in what was then a temperate climate, only to be suddenly cast into the polar night by a catastrophic realignment. The ice then became their shroud and their preservation. It is a haunting idea that somewhere beneath the Antarctic plateau lie the frozen monuments of a forgotten age, their architecture trapped in a crystalline tomb, their stories silenced beneath the weight of eternity.
And yet the silence speaks.
The ice moves. Slowly, imperceptibly, it melts. Each year, satellites detect subtle changes. Rivers of meltwater flowing through crevasses, plumes of ancient methane rising to the surface. The Earth, it seems, is beginning to reveal its past once more. If one day the ice retreats fully, as it has before, humanity may stand face to face with the echoes of its own lost ancestors. We may find that the myths of drowned continents and skyborne fires were not imagination, but memory. Until then, the ice remains our keeper, cold, ancient, and patient. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine standing at the edge of that endless white horizon. Beneath your feet lies an ancient city, sleeping beneath miles of frozen light. Around you, the wind carries whispers, faint echoes of voices, of music, of lives once lived in a world before time began again. The ice remembers, and in that remembrance lies the key to our forgotten beginnings. Now, as the cold fades and the world warms once more, we follow the trail of those who may have survived the flood. The mysterious builders who left their monuments behind, standing defiantly against the march of oblivion. The night is quiet now. The fires of the old world have dimmed. and in their fading glow humanity's oldest story begins again, the story of the flood. Across continents and across ages, whispers of this tale ripple through time like echoes of waves against forgotten shores. From the tablets of Sumer to the chants of the Andes, from the sacred verses of the Bible to the hymns of India's Rig Veda, there is one truth shared among all. A flood once came.
Vast and merciless, erasing nearly all that had been.
But was it merely myth? Or were these stories fragments of something remembered, something survived? In the quiet halls of the British Museum lies a clay tablet, cracked and ancient. Inscribed upon it, in the curling script of Sumer, is the story of Ziusudra, a righteous man warned by the gods of a coming deluge. The gods, angered by the noise and corruption of mankind, resolved to cleanse the earth. Ziusudra built a great vessel, sealed it with pitch, and filled it with animals and seed. When the waters rose, he was spared, drifting for 7 days before the storm passed and life began anew. Thousands of miles away, high in the mountains of Peru, the Quechua elders tell of Unu Pachacuti, the water that turned the world upside down. Their ancestors fled to the peaks, clinging to survival as the ocean swallowed the valleys. In Australia, the Aboriginal Yidinji recount how the sea once surged far inland, turning forests into reefs. The Ojibwe of North America speak of a sky serpent that fell into the sea, burning the earth before the waters rose to cool it. So many voices, so many lands, and yet one shared memory. Modern scholars once dismissed these stories as metaphor, moral lessons born from river floods and human imagination. But over the past few decades, evidence has begun to whisper a different truth. At the end of the last ice age, around 12,800 years ago, Earth was warming. Glaciers receded, seas rose, and the planet breathed again after millennia of cold. But then, in an instant of geological time, something terrible occurred. The temperature plummeted, the ice returned, and for 200 years the world froze once more, a mysterious period now known as the Younger Dryas. No one knows exactly why, but when it ended in fury. Geologists studying the North American landscape have found layers of charcoal and nanodiamonds, microscopic markers of immense heat. Beneath them, black mats of soot and melted glass. These layers date precisely to the end of the Younger Dryas, suggesting that something struck the Earth with unimaginable force. Some say it was a comet, others a swarm of them, fragments that rained upon the northern hemisphere, igniting forests and shattering the climate. The ice sheets melted rapidly, sea levels surged, coastal plains vanished beneath the waves, and if any civilizations had flourished along those lost coasts, they too would have been erased. In the depths of the Black Sea, marine archaeologists discovered ancient shorelines far below today's surface, traces of villages and river deltas drowned around 7,600 years ago. Similarly, off the coast of India, near the Gulf of Khambhat, sonar scans revealed symmetrical structures buried beneath silt and coral, patterns too deliberate to be natural. Carbon dating of wood fragments retrieved nearby suggests human presence long before history officially began. Could these have been remnants of the survivors? In Turkey, the ruins of Göbekli Tepe rise from the earth, their massive stone pillars etched with animal reliefs and celestial symbols. Dated to roughly 11,600 years ago, the exact moment the Younger Dryas ended, this site is the oldest known megalithic complex on Earth. It predates the pyramids by 7,000 years. Its builders appear to have inherited a knowledge not born of primitive hunters, but of memory. Memory perhaps carried through the flood. On one of Göbekli Tepe's pillars, a pattern of animals has long puzzled archaeologists. But when mapped against the stars, it appears to depict the constellations as they would have appeared during that cataclysmic epoch. Among them is a symbol resembling a comet striking the earth. It is as though the stones themselves remember what humans tried to forget. What followed that event may have been nothing less than a reset of civilization. Myths of golden ages abruptly end. Cultures that once thrived vanish from the record, and in their place, stories of re-beginnings arise, of gods teaching men to plant seeds, to count the stars, to build anew. Perhaps, after the waters receded, survivors emerged upon higher ground, bearing fragments of lost knowledge. From the mountains of Anatolia to the valleys of Mesopotamia, humanity began again, guided by memories of a drowned world. In the book of Genesis, Noah's Ark comes to rest upon Mount Ararat. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim's vessel finds land upon Mount Nisir. In the Greek tale, Deucalion's ark drifts to Mount Parnassus. Even in the Andes, the Inca ancestors re-emerge upon the peaks of the Andes after the flood. Always the survivors find salvation on the mountain, and always they look down upon a world remade. Perhaps this is why ancient people revered mountains as sacred, the bridges between heaven and earth, between past and rebirth. And perhaps it is there, amid the silence of high stone and snow, that the last voices of the pre-flood world once echoed. For if the flood did erase the world, it did not erase memory. It merely buried it, beneath oceans, beneath myths, beneath time itself. And now, piece by piece, we are remembering. When the waters withdrew, the world was never the same again. Shorelines had changed. Rivers carved new paths. Entire continents seemed reborn under unfamiliar skies. To those who lived through it, or whose ancestors did, the earth itself must have felt like a stranger. In this reshaped landscape, scattered groups of survivors began to rebuild. They carried little. The memory of fire, the memory of stars, and stories whispered through generations. Stories of wrathful gods, of forbidden knowledge, of the water that took everything away. But perhaps they carried something else too. Knowledge not meant to vanish. Archaeologists studying early post-glacial sites have noticed a strange pattern. Agriculture, architecture, and astronomy, hallmarks of advanced human thinking, seem to appear suddenly, almost as if they were remembered rather than invented. In Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, the Sumerians claimed that their wisdom was given to them by the gods after a great flood. In Egypt, the priests spoke of Zep-Tepi, the first time, when gods walked among men and taught them the sciences. The Maya, thousands of miles away, said the same of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, who arrived after a world-ending deluge. Could it be that these were not myths of divine intervention, but allegories of survival, memories of teachers from an earlier, drowned world? Some modern researchers have dared to connect these stories to the notion of a lost civilization, one that existed before the flood, during the last ice age, a culture of builders, navigators, and astronomers whose knowledge far exceeded what hunter-gatherers were thought capable of. If such a people existed, their cities would likely have stood along the coasts, where rivers met the sea, fertile ground for trade and life. But as the ice melted and sea levels rose by more than 100 meters, those coastlines would have disappeared beneath the waves. Today, more than 2 million square kilometers of continental shelf lie submerged worldwide. That is where the world's first cities might sleep, in silence, beneath centuries of sand and salt. Ocean expeditions have occasionally uncovered strange anomalies on the seafloor. Off the coast of Japan, near Yonaguni, vast stone terraces descend like steps into the deep. Debate rages whether they are natural formations or the remnants of an ancient complex, their edges carved by human hands. Near the Bahamas, divers have found perfectly linear paths of massive limestone blocks, the so-called Bimini Road, which some believe to be the ruins of a pre-flood causeway. And farther east, in the waters near Malta, Paleolithic cart ruts continue beneath the sea, as if the land once extended further before the flood consumed it. Each of these findings is contested, of course. Mainstream archaeology insists there was no global civilization before recorded history. But the consistency of myths, the abrupt rise of agriculture, and the growing list of underwater mysteries whisper another story, one the ocean has tried to keep hidden. Let us turn again to the sky, for it too may hold clues. Ancient traditions often link the flood to celestial events, a falling star, a serpent in the heavens, a war among the gods. Astronomers studying ice cores from Greenland have detected a spike of platinum and soot, dating precisely to the Younger Dryas boundary, suggesting a cosmic impact. Computer models show that debris from a disintegrating comet could have struck multiple regions simultaneously, setting the northern hemisphere ablaze. If the heat of impact melted enough of the Laurentide ice sheet, the vast frozen mass once covering Canada, it could have unleashed torrents equal to millions of Niagara Falls. The meltwater surged into the oceans, raising sea levels by tens of meters in just a few centuries. The flood myths, then, may not speak of divine wrath, but of cosmic chance, a celestial event written into the bones of the planet. And yet, within these stories, there is always hope. In every culture, the flood does not mark an end, but a beginning.
Noah's dove returns with an olive branch.
Ziusudra steps into the sunlight of a cleansed world. Deucalion and Pyrrha repopulate the earth with stones that turn to men. The Andean heroes, emerging from the caves, plant seeds in the new soil. Each tale teaches that destruction is never final, that life renews itself even after the deepest silence. Perhaps that is why the ancients remembered. They carried their stories not to frighten, but to warn, to remind us that the earth remembers and that we too must listen. Today, as scientists watch the glaciers melt again, as coastlines shift and seas reclaim the edges of our world, the old flood stories take on new meaning. They are not only echoes of the past, but warnings of cycles repeating. For if the flood truly erased the world once, it could happen again. And maybe, deep within our collective memory, we already know this truth. As the waters rise, so do the stories, resurfacing like ancient land beneath a retreating tide. And so the flood that once erased the world may yet remind us why it was worth saving. The flood had come and gone, leaving behind a world cleansed, reshaped, and quiet. Yet from its silence, something remarkable began to stir. Across continents and oceans, humanity, small, scattered, and fragile, began to build again, but not as before. This time, the stones were larger. The alignments were precise, and the monuments they left behind whispered of a knowledge far older than the world they now inhabited.
Who were these builders?
And how, in the deep dawn of time, before cities, before writing, before metal, did they raise monuments that still defy explanation today? Our story begins where civilization itself is said to have awoken, in the high hills of southeastern Turkey. There, on a dusty plateau overlooking the plains of Harran, stands Göbekli Tepe, a name now etched into the very mystery of human origins. When archaeologists first uncovered its immense limestone pillars in the 1990s, they were astonished. The site dates to nearly 11,600 years ago, thousands of years before Stonehenge, before Egypt, before Sumer. And yet the craftsmanship is extraordinary. Circular enclosures of towering T-shaped monoliths, some weighing up to 20 tons, stand arranged with perfect geometry. The stones are carved with foxes, vultures, scorpions, and snakes, symbols of life and death, of the heavens and the underworld. The precision, the planning, and the sheer labor required suggest a level of organization far beyond what hunter-gatherers were thought capable of. It was as if someone had handed them the blueprint of civilization itself. Yet what puzzles researchers most is not just how Göbekli Tepe was built, but why. There is no evidence that its builders lived there. No homes, no hearths, no refuse, only sanctuaries, carefully arranged and eventually buried beneath tons of earth. It is as though, once their purpose was fulfilled, the builders themselves sealed their creation and disappeared, And then, for reasons still unknown, civilization blossomed elsewhere, along rivers and valleys thousands of miles away. The knowledge to build monumental architecture seemed to vanish, only to reappear millennia later. Was Göbekli Tepe a solitary miracle, born of sudden genius? Or was it the echo of something older, something remembered? Half a world away, on a chain of volcanic islands in the Pacific, lies another enigma carved from stone. Nan Madol. Rising from the shallow waters off the island of Pohnpei, it is often called the Venice of the Pacific. A city built upon coral foundations, its walls are made of massive basalt logs, some weighing more than 50 tons each, stacked like pillars of a forgotten age. According to local legend, the city was founded by two brothers who arrived from the west and possessed the secret of levitating stones with the help of a dragon spirit. Modern engineers, however, still struggle to explain how such a construction was achieved using only primitive tools. The basalt prisms had to be quarried, transported across rough terrain, and set into place over a sprawling network of 90 artificial islets, all without wheels, cranes, or beasts of burden. Radiocarbon dating suggests that Nan Madol was established at least 1,000 years ago. But oral tradition speaks of something much older, a sacred place built upon the ruins of an even more ancient foundation. And then there is Baalbek in Lebanon, where the foundations of the ancient temple of Jupiter rest upon stones of inconceivable size. The largest, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighs over 1,000 tons. To this day, no modern crane could lift it intact. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza aligns almost perfectly with true north, its sides deviating by less than a fraction of a degree. Beneath it, in the bedrock, are precision-cut granite boxes, each carved from a single block with surfaces so flat they would require modern machinery to replicate. And deep in South America, at the site of Pumapunku in Bolivia, stone blocks of red sandstone and andesite fit together like interlocking puzzle pieces, cut with such exactness that even a razor blade cannot slip between them. These places, scattered across continents, share a strange common thread. They were built as if by memory, as if their builders were following ancient instructions, guidelines preserved from a world erased. Geologists studying Göbekli Tepe have dated its earliest layers to around 9,600 BCE, the very moment the Younger Dryas ended, when glaciers melted and sea levels rose catastrophically. The coincidence is too striking to ignore. What if the builders were survivors, remnants of an earlier civilization destroyed by the flood? What if their monuments were not the beginning of civilization, but its rebirth? Some researchers point to curious details: the astronomical alignments, the advanced stone cutting, the sudden emergence of agriculture shortly afterward, as evidence of guidance, of inherited knowledge. Others dismiss it as coincidence, the natural outcome of human curiosity and adaptation. But what cannot be denied is that these sites appear too soon, too perfect, too deliberate. They suggest that the people of that time were not simply wandering tribes, but inheritors of something vast and ancient, something now lost to time. Perhaps that is why so many of these structures seem to speak of the stars. The builders, having survived catastrophe, may have looked upward, to remember where they came from, or to mark what was lost. Göbekli Tepe's carvings may tell of constellations. Baalbek's temple faces the rising sun at the equinox, and at Teotihuacan, the Pyramid of the Sun stands in alignment with the path of Venus, the same planet worshipped as a morning star by civilizations separated by oceans and ages. Coincidence or remembrance? As we walk among the stones today, we can feel it, the weight of forgotten time pressing down from every carved edge. These monuments were not just built, they were placed as though meant to remind us of something we once knew but have since forgotten. They stand as messages in stone, silent yet unyielding, awaiting those who would listen. For perhaps the greatest mystery of all is not how they were built, but who remembered enough to build them. If we listen closely, the stones still speak. Their language is geometry, their rhythm is alignment, and their message, though half buried beneath millennia of sand and soil, still whispers of origins older than memory itself. The builders who came before may have vanished, yet their fingerprints remain, pressed into the world's bedrock from Anatolia to the Andes. To trace their trail, we must follow the stones themselves, because stones remember. At Sacsayhuaman, high above the Peruvian city of Cusco, vast walls of interlocking stone blocks rise in zigzag terraces. Each block, some weighing over 300 tons, is shaped so precisely that no mortar was needed. Their edges curve and lock as though softened and molded like clay, yet they are carved from some of the hardest rock on earth. Local legend attributes the site to Viracocha, the great creator god who, according to Andean myth, emerged after the flood to rebuild humanity. He is often described as a tall, bearded figure with shining eyes, curiously unlike the native Andean people. The Inca themselves claimed they did not build Sacsayhuaman, they merely found it. If true, then who did? In the highlands of Bolivia lies Tiwanaku and its adjoining complex, Pumapunku. The blocks there are cut from diorite and andesite, rocks so hard they rival granite. Each piece bears precise right angles, perfectly drilled holes, and channels so symmetrical that modern engineers, studying their patterns, admit the tools used remain unidentified. Archaeologists once dated Tiwanaku to around 500 CE, but beneath the surface, deeper strata contain signs of far older habitation. Geological evidence hints that the site may once have stood beside a larger version of Lake Titicaca, when the waterline was hundreds of feet higher, suggesting an age of perhaps 10,000 years or more. If that is true, then Tiwanaku would not be the creation of a known civilization at all, but a survivor of an earlier world. Across the globe, similar anomalies persist. In the Sinai Desert, an immense array of stone circles and mounds stretch for miles, their purpose unknown. In the jungles of Cambodia, Angkor Wat, aligned with the constellation Draco, stands upon foundations that some surveys suggest predate the Khmer Empire by centuries. Even in the heart of the Atlantic, sonar surveys have occasionally revealed what appear to be rectangular structures deep beneath the ocean floor. Curious patterns, too regular to be dismissed outright. Each of these places, though separated by continents, seems to share one defining signature, a mastery of stone that appears out of sequence with the accepted timeline of human progress. Perhaps the builders knew something we have forgotten, not only about the Earth, but about its cycles. Many ancient sites seem to mark the turning of ages, the precession of the equinoxes, the slow shifting of the stars over 26,000 years. Göbekli Tepe's carvings, once thought decorative, may encode the position of constellations during the cataclysm that ended the Younger Dryas. The Sphinx of Giza, weathered by water despite Egypt's arid climate, faces the rising of Leo in the dawn sky, an alignment that would have occurred around 10500 BCE. If true, these builders were not primitive. They were astronomers, engineers, and philosophers, watchers of the heavens who measured time not in years, but in epochs. They may have built not to create civilization, but to preserve it. Imagine for a moment a world before the flood. Vast coastlines stretched where oceans now roll. Cities, perhaps not like ours, but real nonetheless, stood near rivers and bays, trading under skies alive with comets. Then came the catastrophe. Fire from the heavens, walls of water, the long winter. When the survivors emerged, their knowledge was fragmented. They remembered enough to align stones with the stars, to raise temples to forgotten gods, to measure the world and the heavens as one. But the language of their science became myth, their symbols became stories, and so the memory of their world faded until all that remained were the stones. Modern archaeology still struggles to reconcile these anomalies with accepted timelines. Many scientists attribute the precision of ancient structures to ingenuity and perseverance rather than lost knowledge. Yet even the most rational among them cannot explain why. Agriculture, astronomy, and monumental construction all seem to appear simultaneously across distant regions at the dawn of the Holocene. It is as though humanity awoke one morning with the memory of how to build, yet no memory of why. Some call it coincidence,
Others call it inheritance.
but perhaps it was something deeper, a rekindling of a forgotten pattern, a cycle that has turned many times before. Civilizations rise, fall, and rise again, leaving behind faint echoes of the last. The builders who came before may not have vanished entirely. They may live within us, in our restless need to shape, to measure, to understand the universe. When we raise skyscrapers or send probes to the stars, perhaps we are only continuing the story they began. As the night deepens and our story draws to a close, let us return once more to the stones. At Göbekli Tepe, the fox still runs along the carved pillars, its shadow cast by the rising moon. At Nan Madol, the waves lap quietly against the basalt walls, as if whispering to the dead. And in the silence of Baalbek, beneath the endless stars, the ancient foundation stones rest as they have for thousands of years, immovable, indestructible, waiting. Perhaps they wait for us to remember. Because the question is not whether these builders existed, it is whether we too are merely the next in their long-forgotten line. The floodwaters had receded. The great builders were gone. Yet somehow, somewhere, traces of their knowledge endured. Centuries later, when sailors of the Renaissance began charting the world anew, they carried with them instruments of brass and parchment, but also maps. Strange, ancient maps whose origins they could not explain. Maps that showed lands no one of their time had ever seen. One such map, yellowed with age and drawn upon the skin of a gazelle, was brought to light in Constantinople in the year 1513. Its maker, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis, claimed that he had compiled it from 20 ancient charts. Some from Arab navigators, some from Greeks, and some, he said, from the time of Alexander. At first glance, the map appeared to show the familiar outlines of the coasts of Europe, Africa, and the Americas. But one detail stood out, a sweeping expanse of land at the map's southern edge, curving like the bottom of a great sphere. It was labelled simply Terra Australis Incognita. Modern scholars dismissed it as imagination. But when 20th century cartographers analysed the Piri Reis map, they found something extraordinary. That southern landmass was drawn with uncanny accuracy, its contour matching the coast of Antarctica. More astonishing still, it appeared ice-free. According to official science, Antarctica has been buried under ice for more than 1 million years. Its present coastline is invisible beneath miles of frozen cap. Yet, when the US Air Force compared the Piri Reis projection to seismic surveys of the subglacial continent in 1949, the match was near perfect. How could a 16th century admiral have drawn an accurate map of a land unknown to his age, let alone one that depicted it as it existed before the ice returned, more than 12,000 years ago? Piri Reis himself left clues. In his meticulous notes, scrawled along the map's margins, he wrote, "These charts were drawn in the days of Alexander, from maps made in the time of the ancient kings." He even mentions maps drawn according to mathematics and geometry, far older than any known to his day. It is as if he inherited fragments from an age long gone, an age of sailors who had already charted the world when Europe was still locked in ice. The Piri Reis map is not alone. Another, the Orontius Phineus map of 1531, shows Antarctica not as an unknown southern continent, but as a detailed landmass complete with rivers,
Mountain ranges and bays, again, rendered without ice.
The scale and precision of its latitude lines suggest that whoever first recorded it possessed knowledge of spherical geometry and longitude calculation, techniques not rediscovered until the 18th century, Similarly, the Hajj Ahmed map of 1559 places a vast southern continent directly beneath Africa, its shape resembling the hidden subglacial terrain modern scientists mapped only in the 20th century. Even the Boache map of 1737, drawn centuries later, depicts Antarctica split into two main islands divided by a water channel, exactly as radar imaging revealed in the 1950s beneath the ice sheet. To those who first studied these maps, the implications were almost unthinkable. Had there been ancient mariners who possessed the means to chart the entire globe long before recorded history? If so, who were they? Some researchers have suggested that these mysterious cartographers may have been the survivors of an earlier advanced civilization, perhaps the same lost culture whose builders raised Göbekli Tepe and the pyramids, and who vanished when the Younger Dryas flood erased their world. If remnants of that civilization escaped the deluge, they may have carried with them their most precious tool, knowledge of the earth itself. They may have resettled in far-flung places, teaching navigation, geometry, and astronomy to peoples who would later mythologize them as gods. Indeed, almost every ancient tradition speaks of such figures. The Sumerians had Oannes, the fishman who came from the sea bearing wisdom. The Egyptians had Thoth, master of measurement and the stars. The Maya revered Itzamna, the bringer of writing and calendars. And in Peru, Viracocha, he who came after the flood, was said to have taught men to sail and build. Could it be that these myths recall the same wandering navigators who once mapped a world now forgotten? Cartographers of the modern era have tried to dismiss such notions. They argue that the Antarctica of these old maps was simply a speculative landmass imagined to balance the globe. Yet the mathematical precision of coastlines, rivers, and mountains beneath the ice argues otherwise. Even the map projections themselves show advanced understanding of global curvature, a concept thought unknown before the invention of the chronometer. Whoever made the source maps understood not just geography but geodesy, the measurement of the Earth's shape. But there is one more mystery still to unfold. If these maps truly came from a pre-Ice Age world, then they reveal something extraordinary, the last known glimpse of Earth before the reset, a time when Antarctica was green, when seas were lower, when continents connected differently, a time perhaps when human civilization, older than our history books allow, sailed upon oceans that no longer exist. If that is true, then these maps are not just records. They are memories, encoded into parchment and legend. They may represent the last surviving evidence of a world that once was, and the people who once knew it. When we stare at the elegant curves and calligraphy of the Piri Reis map, it's easy to forget what it truly represents. Not ink on vellum, but memory. Inherited knowledge passed across cultures, recopied through generations, like a message whispered through time. And if that message was indeed a map of the world before ice reclaimed it, then the implications are vast. Let us drift now across centuries and oceans, tracing this mysterious inheritance. In the 18th century, as the Age of Enlightenment bloomed, scholars began rediscovering ancient charts long buried in dusty archives. Among them were fragments attributed to a man named Orontius Phineus, a French cartographer, who in 1531 drew a remarkably accurate depiction of Antarctica's general outline. His version showed not a frozen wasteland, but a land with rivers, valleys, and perhaps vegetation. No one in his age had seen such a place. Antarctica would not be officially sighted until 1820, nearly 3 centuries later. When modern cartographers compared Phineus's southern continent to the seismic surveys of Antarctica beneath its ice, the fit was
unsettling.
The match between the map's contours and the subglacial topography suggested that the cartographer, or his source, had access to knowledge of the Earth's surface long before it was frozen. Could it be, as some geologists propose, that the last time Antarctica was ice-free was more than 12,000 years ago, precisely around the time of the Great Flood myths and the end of the Younger Dryas? But Phineas was not alone in this mystery. Several maps from the 15th and 16th centuries seem to share a peculiar, almost secret lineage. They show South America's full coastline before it was known to Europeans. They depict the Andes with surprising precision. They even link distant continents in ways official exploration had yet to confirm. The question arises, where did this data come from? Piri Reis himself confessed that his chart was not his original work. He had compiled it from 20 charts and mappae mundi, including maps drawn in the time of Alexander the Great, and even maps from the Portuguese and ancient seafarers. He wrote that some of these maps had been inherited from the early kings of the seas. Who were these early kings? The notion of a forgotten civilization, one that mastered navigation long before the Phoenicians or Greeks, begins to take shape. Across myth and folklore, echoes of such a people persist. The ancient Egyptians spoke of a divine race who came from the west after their homeland was swallowed by water. The Sumerians wrote of the Apkallu, sage beings who rose from the sea to teach mankind art, measurement, and astronomy. In the high Andes, the Inca legend of Viracocha tells of a great teacher who arrived by boat, dressed in white, carrying knowledge of the heavens and the earth. In Polynesia, there are tales of the Takitimu, great navigators from a vanished island to the east, who sailed before the stars were as they are now. Each of these accounts, scattered across the globe, seems to whisper of an age when humanity's map of the world was very different. Perhaps not merely geographically, but cosmically. To dismiss it all as coincidence would be easy, yet history seldom unfolds in straight lines. Consider the precision of the Great Pyramid's alignment to true north, or the astronomical layout of ancient temples across continents. To master such geometry requires knowledge of latitude and the curvature of the earth, knowledge intimately linked with navigation and mapping. If the builders of prehistory could align monuments with stars of the farthest skies, might they also have charted the seas? Perhaps these maps are not anomalies, but remnants, shadows of a science once known, then lost. And so the Piri Reis map becomes more than a curiosity. It becomes a relic, not of the 16th century, but of something much older. A survivor of cataclysm copied by sailors who did not understand its true antiquity. Imagine this: survivors of a great flood, remnants of a civilization undone, setting sail in search of new lands. They carry fragments of their former knowledge, the courses of stars, the memory of shorelines now drowned. Their descendants, scattered across the world, preserve that knowledge imperfectly, embedding it in legend and symbol. By the time those maps reach Piri Reis's desk, their origins are already ancient beyond recall. In 1960, when the US Navy studied the Piri Reis chart, Commander Arlington Mallory and cartographer Harold Z. Ohlmeyer concluded that the depiction of Antarctica was indeed accurate for a time before ice. In a letter to Charles Hapgood, Ohlmeyer wrote, "This indicates the original source map must have been made before the region was covered by ice. We have no idea how this data could have been known to any people prior to our own time. Mainstream science remains cautious, noting that many features could be coincidental or misinterpretations of South America. Yet beneath the caution, the enigma lingers, the uncomfortable fit between our accepted timeline and the evidence carved in parchment. If once, long ago, there existed a civilization capable of global navigation, their world would have ended swiftly, violently, and almost completely. The seas rose, the skies changed, and ice reclaimed continents. Their monuments, their ports, their cities, gone. But perhaps their knowledge survived in one form, as maps copied from copy to copy, like faint fingerprints of a lost age. And tonight, as we close this chapter, we can only imagine the last cartographers of that forgotten world, watching the oceans rise, charting not the world they would sail, but the one they would leave behind. Perhaps they hoped someone someday would find their maps.
And remember, above us, The night sky glows, serene, eternal, and deceptively hot.
Yet across the ages the ancients warned that the heavens are not always peaceful. They spoke of nights when stars rained fire, when gods hurled flaming serpents across the sky, when the world itself trembled under the weight of celestial wrath. As we have journeyed through the ruins, maps, and floods of forgotten ages, one truth whispers ever more clearly. Earth's story may not be written solely by wind and water, but by fire from the sky. Let us now look upward, to the stars, to the comet, to the cycles that may mark the rhythm of our planet's rebirths. In ancient texts from Mesopotamia, the word Nibiru describes a wandering star, a celestial body whose appearance signaled upheaval on Earth. In China, imperial astronomers chronicled sky dragons whose fiery trails preceded droughts, plagues, or the fall of dynasties. The Mayans, too, carved into stone the path of the heavens, believing that when Venus glowed brightest, destruction would follow. To the ancients, the sky was not distant. It was alive, reactive, a vast clock whose hands could strike doom as easily as dawn. Today, modern astronomy begins to decode what they once intuited. For scattered across the solar system, we find the remnants of catastrophe, asteroid belts, cometary debris streams, and impact scars on every terrestrial world, including our own.
Earth too bears the fingerprints of celestial violence.
One such scar lies in the American Midwest, the meteor crater of Arizona. Nearly a kilometer wide, it was gouged out some 50,000 years ago by a nickel-iron meteorite that struck with the force of 150 atomic bombs. But that was a small one. Around 12,800 years ago, as the last ice age waned, the Earth was struck by something far greater, or perhaps many somethings. Across North America and beyond, a strange layer of dark sediment, known as the Younger Dryas boundary, tells the tale. Within it are traces of nanodiamonds, microspherules, and melted glass, all signatures of intense cosmic impact or airburst. It coincides precisely with a sudden global cooling, mass extinctions, and the flooding events we explored in earlier chapters. In other words, how it matches the time when the world reset.
If true, then comets or fragments from space did not merely wound the planet, they rewrote its history.
Cultures that may have been rising toward civilization were erased. Ice returned. Floods followed. Memory turned to myth. The Hopi speak of a sky fire that ended the Third World. The Sanskrit texts of India recall weapons of the gods that shone like 1,000 suns and burned the earth. The Norse Eddas describe Ragnarok, when the stars fall and fire consumes the world.
Different tongues.
The same pattern. And when modern scientists study long-term comet cycles, they find something astonishing. The Taurid complex, a vast stream of debris left behind by a disintegrated giant comet, crosses Earth's orbit twice each year. Within that stream lie countless fragments, some large enough to cause regional or even global devastation if they strike.
It is as though Earth moves through a cosmic firing range, returning to it predictably, like the ticking of an unseen clock.
Could it be, then, that the ancients were not merely telling stories of wrathful gods, but preserving memory? Perhaps they watched the sky more closely than we do. They tracked the movements of Venus, the shifting nodes of the moon, the appearances of comets. They built observatories of stone at Nabta Playa, at Chaco Canyon, at Göbekli Tepe, not to worship, but to warn. These sites often align not just with solstices, but with the radiance of meteor showers. In the shadows of ancient temples, symbols of serpents, dragons, and flaming discs recur again and again, not random, but astronomical. To them, the dragon in the sky was no myth. It was the serpent of fire that sometimes devoured worlds. Modern astrophysicists now propose that the sun itself may also play a part in this cosmic rhythm. Roughly every 10–12,000 years, i.e. the very cycle echoed in geological and mythological records, the Sun experiences immense magnetic upheaval, triggering solar outbursts capable of stripping atmospheres and disrupting climates. Solar plasma commentary, debris, and Earth's fragile balance, all intertwined in a dance that resets civilization's clock. Could this be what the ancients called the Wheel of Ages? The Vedic texts speak of yugas, cycles of creation and destruction. The Greeks told of ages of gold, silver, bronze, and iron, each ending in cataclysm. The Maya recorded suns, 5 worlds, each destroyed by an element: flood, fire, wind, or quake. If the heavens operate on a schedule, then perhaps we are passengers on a clock we barely understand. And yet, one haunting question lingers. How close are we to midnight? Scientists warn that large objects remain hidden in the inner solar system. Dark comets and debris fields, remnants of ancient collisions. The Torrid Stream, in particular, contains larger bodies on paths that will intersect Earth's orbit again, in our lifetime or our children's. As we gaze upward tonight, it is tempting to believe the cosmos is indifferent. But history, myth, and geology together whisper otherwise. The sky has a memory.
And it has a schedule. When we look into the night sky, we often see serenity, stars glimmering like tiny, eternal sentinels.
Yet for most of human history, the sky was not a comfort. It was a warning. Every streak of light, every sudden brilliance against the black, carried fear. To ancient eyes, those falling stars were not just celestial events. They were omens, signals from the cosmos that change was coming. And perhaps they were right. In the 20th century, scientists began to uncover evidence that Earth's quiet skies are deceptive. The Tunguska event of 1908, a blast over the Siberian taiga that flattened 80 million trees, remains one of the most powerful natural explosions in recorded history. No crater was ever found because the object, likely a small comet or asteroid, detonated before striking the ground. The energy released was equivalent to a modern nuclear bomb. Had it occurred over a city, civilization would have borne the scar for centuries. And yet, Tunguska was only a whisper of what has come before. Recent research suggests that multiple Tunguska-sized impacts may occur every few centuries, or even more frequently. Our planet is not a tranquil island, but a moving target, passing through bands of debris that orbit the Sun. Some astronomers now suspect that these debris streams, particularly the Torrid complex, may have been the trigger for many of the catastrophic resets that punctuate Earth's story. Let us return for a moment to those who watched the sky before telescopes, the ancient astronomers and myth keepers. The great stone circles and alignments of antiquity, from the megaliths of Britain to the observatories of Mesoamerica, often align with more than the sun and moon. Some match the radiant points of recurring meteor showers. The ancients may have tracked not only the seasons of the earth, but the seasons of the heavens, the times when skyfire was due to return. Imagine a world in which knowledge of the stars was not about navigation or worship, but survival. At Göbekli Tepe, that temple of stone older than history itself, archaeologists have found carvings of animals and celestial symbols that may encode an event around 10,150 BCE, a cosmic impact, possibly from the Torrid Stream. The now famous Vulture Stone, or Pillar 43, shows a cluster of stars, a comet, and falling objects, an ancient sky map in stone marking the end of an age. If this interpretation holds true, it suggests that humanity's first known monument was not a temple to gods, but a memorial to a catastrophe. Modern astrophysics lends further weight to this cosmic pattern. Studies of ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica reveal spikes of platinum, an element rare on Earth's surface but common in asteroids, precisely at the onset of the Younger Dryas Cold period. In the same layers, concentrations of soot and nanodiamonds speak of global fires. The conclusion is hard to escape. A cosmic impact, or a series of them, once reshaped the planet's climate, its ecosystems, and the course of civilization. And when researchers project the orbits of debris fields and comets, they find a rhythmic recurrence, a cycle of bombardment roughly every 12 to 13,000 years.
A celestial heartbeat.
A cosmic clock. But perhaps there is another hand on that clock, the sun itself. Though it nourishes life, the sun is no gentle star. It breathes, it pulses, and occasionally it roars. Every 11 years, its magnetic field flips, unleashing storms of radiation. Yet, on longer timescales, every 10,000 to 12,000 years, the sun appears to enter phases of extreme instability. Massive solar outbursts, known as micronovae, could scorch Earth's atmosphere, melt ice sheets, and disrupt the planet's magnetic field. Some scientists, studying isotopes in tree rings and sediments, have found evidence of ancient solar events powerful than anything recorded in modern times. Could this be what the ancients saw? Skies ablaze, auroras bleeding across the equator, the sun itself erupting like a god of fire. If so, then the sky dragons of Chinese chronicles and the serpent of fire in Mesoamerican myth were not poetic inventions, but memories of solar storms that turned night into day. Together, these forces, cometary debris and solar fury, form a cosmic mechanism of renewal. Destruction, yes, but also rebirth. Each reset clears the canvas of the world, allowing life and civilization to begin again. And if we listen closely, the myths that once seemed like fantasy may contain a warning that this clock will strike again. Our telescopes now scan the sky for what our ancestors once watched with naked eyes. Near-Earth objects, dark comets, dormant threats drifting in the black. Space agencies track them obsessively, yet many remain unseen, hidden in the glare of the sun or masked by distance. When, not if, another fragment crosses our path, it may come with little warning. But, unlike those who came before, we possess a gift they did not, knowledge. The ability to see the past not as myth, but as memory written in stone, ice, and sky. Perhaps that is why humanity has always looked upward with both fear and fascination. Deep down, we sense that our fate is tied to the stars, that the heavens themselves breathe with us. The cosmic clock keeps time not in minutes or years, but in ages, and somewhere, far above, the next hand is already moving. When it falls, it will not be wrath or vengeance, merely the next turn of the eternal wheel. And as the ancients knew, from ruin comes renewal. In the next chapter, we'll journey from the stars back to Earth, into the realms of buried machines, ancient metals, and relics that should not exist. Clues that survivors of these resets may have left their mark behind. The night has fallen quiet. The storms, the floods, the fires from the sky, all have passed. And yet, something lingers.
A faint echo that seems to hum beneath the surface of sleep. A memory that does not belong to us, and yet feels deeply familiar.
If civilizations before us once rose and fell, if entire ages have come and gone like breaths of the earth, then where do their memories rest? Perhaps not in stone nor in ruin, but within us. The ancient Egyptians called it the Zep Tepi, the first time. A golden age when gods walked among men, when order reigned over chaos. Yet they spoke of it not as myth, but as memory. Something their ancestors had witnessed long before recorded history began. In India, the sages described vast cycles of creation, yugas, in which humanity rises toward enlightenment, only to fall again into ignorance before the world resets and the dance begins anew. The Mayans told of the suns, each an age that ends in catastrophe, giving birth to another. And across continents, from Aboriginal Australia to the mountains of Tibet, the same message echoes. we have lived before. It is as though the earth itself dreams, and through us remembers. Science has begun to explore a strange concept, genetic memory. The idea that experiences, traumas, or instincts can be imprinted into the very code of life and pass through generations.
Salmon know where to return.
Birds trace invisible maps across the sky. Children sometimes dream of places they have never been, yet can describe in detail. Could it be that memory, not only personal but civilizational, survives extinction in subtle ways? Perhaps when the great floods came, when fire rained from the sky, when the last of the old builders vanished, something of their knowledge sank deep into our collective mind. Not in words, but in symbols, in stories, in the strange architectures of myth. Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious, a shared psychic reservoir where humanity's deepest experiences dwell. From it emerged the same archetypes in every culture: the flood hero, the sky serpent, the wise teacher from the sea, the fall and rebirth of the world. Jung believed these patterns were not invented but remembered, the inherited fragments of experiences our ancestors endured. When we dream of falling, of drowning, of fire, or of flight, perhaps we are not simply imagining, perhaps we are remembering. Consider how myths from opposite ends of the world mirror one another. The Sumerian tale of Ziusudra and the Hebrew story of Noah, the Hopi legend of the ant people who sheltered humanity underground during the burning sky, the Greek myth of Phaethon, whose reckless chariot set the heavens aflame.
These are not just coincidences.
They are echoes, the same dream told by different voices.
It is as if the human species carries a hidden script, one written before writing itself, repeating across the ages, reshaping itself with every dawn.
Dreams, too, have long been seen as more than illusions of the mind. Ancient oracles believed that in dreams the veil between past and future thins. The Aboriginal Dreamtime speaks of the world being sung into existence, a realm outside of time where ancestors still walk and whisper. Could the dream be the bridge, the quiet space where the memories of lost worlds reach us? Some have claimed moments of inexplicable familiarity, déjà vu. The eerie sense that one has stood in this place before, lived this moment already. Science explains it as a trick of perception. But what if it's something more, a faint resonance from a life, a civilization, a story long gone, yet still encoded in the soul? Every civilization we've explored in these chapters, from the builders of Göbekli Tepe to the map makers of the forgotten world, left behind more than ruins. They left patterns, and those patterns keep reappearing. We build pyramids again. We study the stars again. We fear the flood again, as though guided not only by curiosity, but by an ancient remembrance, an instinctual pull toward rebuilding what once was. Maybe progress is not a straight line at all. Maybe it is a spiral, returning always to the same point, but one level higher, somewhere between the waking world and the dream, between history and myth. There lies a silent knowing that our story has been written before, erased, and written again. And if the Earth's great clock truly turns in cycles, then perhaps our dreams are its chime. Quiet reminders that nothing is ever lost, only waiting to be remembered. When night deepens and the world grows still, something ancient stirs within us. Beneath the layers of thought and reason, beneath even memory itself, there lies a faint pulse, a whisper of something we have known before. It calls to us in the language of intuition, of longing, of déjà vu.
What if this whisper is not imagination,
but inheritance? In every culture, there are moments when humanity seems to remember itself. An inventor dreams of a mechanism never seen before, only to wake and build it. A composer hears music that seems to arrive from nowhere, as if plucked from another age. Children draw symbols that echo those carved into stones thousands of years old. Could such creativity be rediscovery? Fragments of a memory so deep that it feels like inspiration? Even great minds have wondered. Nikola Tesla claimed that his visions of invention came fully formed, as if revealed from a hidden realm. Albert Einstein once said that imagination is simply memory freed from time. Across disciplines, from mysticism to neurology, the same question arises. Does the human mind store more than its own lifetime? Some researchers studying near-death experiences and altered states describe a peculiar phenomenon, a sense of universal memory, where individuals feel connected to everything that ever was. Time collapses, the self dissolves, and in its place comes a vast, timeless awareness. To those who experience it, this realm is not fantasy.
It feels like home.
The ancients described it too. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the soul, upon leaving the body, is said to journey through halls of memory, confronting the truths of past ages. In Tibetan tradition, the bardo, the space between lives, is a realm where souls reflect upon countless incarnations. If civilizations rise and fall as lives do, perhaps they too have afterlives, lingering in the collective dream of humanity, waiting for the next dawn to awaken their echoes. In modern times, psychologists have noticed something strange in children: spontaneous memories of places, languages, or skills they have never learned. These accounts, often dismissed by material science, have been studied extensively by researchers such as Dr. Ian Stevenson, who documented thousands of cases across the world. Some were verifiable, some were not. But what they all share is the same haunting implication. Memory may be deeper, broader, and older than a single life. If that is true on the level of individuals, could it also be true on the level of civilizations? Could humanity itself be one being, reincarnating through time, remembering its past lives through myth and instinct? Perhaps the lost worlds we speak of, Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, are not merely places but phases of the same collective soul. Each rise and fall is a breath, each rediscovery a dream recalled after long sleep. And maybe this explains why we are drawn again and again to rebuild what was lost, why we raise monuments to the stars, why we seek origins beneath the ice and the sea, why we look upward still searching for home. It is not ambition, it is remembrance. The same way a seed remembers how to grow into a tree, humanity may remember how to become what it once was. The knowledge we call innovation may be recollection, the return of a pattern that never truly vanished, only slumbered. Our myths, then, are not lies, they are blueprints, stories encoded with instructions from the last world to the next.
As we dream, perhaps we walk the ruins of that older Earth, not as archaeologists, but as its descendants.
We see the oceans rising, the fire in the sky, the towers falling, and the silence after. We wake with the feeling that something vast has been forgotten. And maybe that is the purpose of our dreaming, to remember slowly, gently what we once knew. Because to remember too quickly might break the illusion of beginning, and history, like consciousness, seems to need its forgetting. So we move forward, building cities, writing stories, mapping stars, all while carrying the faint residue of those who came before. We are their echo, their continuation, their dream reborn in flesh. And if one day our own world fades, perhaps it too will live on in the minds of those yet to come, not as fact, but as legend, a whisper in the dark, a myth of gods and fire.
A story about a people who rose, who fell, and who dreamed they had lived before.
The cosmic clock ticks on, the cycles turn, worlds end and begin again. But the memory, that strange sacred thread running through time, remains unbroken. Perhaps it is not history that repeats, but memory that insists on being told. And so as you drift now into sleep, remember this: we may have lived this story many times before, and when the dream begins anew, we will remember again.